In the Epic Fury campaign, global military media was recently rocked by a staggering image. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps celebrating a strike that supposedly destroyed a US E-3 Sentry at Prince Sultan Air Base. The $300 million platform was shown with its tail section torn open, reduced to a smoldering pile of scrap. If true, this would mark the first time in its nearly 50-year history that an American E-3 has been lost to enemy fire. Yet, this event reveals a bizarre paradox. Why take such immense pride in hitting a machine that carries no weapons? Look at the facts. In the sky, this giant cruises with a maximum takeoff weight of over 162 tons of steel. Perched on its back is a massive 30-foot radar dome, what pilots jokingly call the Flying Oreo. But inside that bulky exterior, there isn't a single cannon, not a single missile, and not even a layer of protective armor. It is slow, and on paper, it is virtually helpless against any enemy fighter. So why is it priority one, forcing the enemy to throw everything at piercing the defensive umbrella just to hunt it down? Because strategists understand a brutal truth. Shooting down a dozen stealthy F-35s might not turn the tide, but blinding just one E-3 instantly paralyzes the entire air combat network. The E-3 doesn't need guns. Its weapon is the power to command the battle space from the stratosphere. Without this all-seeing eye for guidance, even the most advanced American fighter swarms immediately become blind in midair. Today, we're dissecting the legend of the E-3 Sentry AWACS, the brain of the U.S. Air Force. We'll decode Pulse-Doppler radar, explore the claustrophobic life of the crew inside this steel shell, and answer the life-or-death question: what does this unarmed fortress do when locked on by a hypersonic missile? The dissection begins now. Most of what you've seen of the E-3 Sentry stops at passenger cabin vlogs. Today, let's look at it through the lens of an intelligence blueprint. To understand why the E-3 remains the backbone of global early warning after 4 decades, we start with its foundation, the Boeing 707 commercial airframe. Powering this behemoth are 4 TF-33 low-bypass turbofans. They don't provide supersonic speed. Instead, they prioritize raw endurance. Interestingly, these are the same engines breathing life into the B-52 Stratofortress. This commonality ensures the E-3 has the stamina to orbit a hotspot for 8 to 12 hours straight. However, behind that endurance is a bleeding logistical nightmare. The Boeing 707 production line closed for good in 1991. To keep the E-3 fleet airborne in the 21st century, the Air Force has resorted to a bitter solution known as cannibalization. They send engineering teams to AMARG, the massive boneyard in the Arizona desert. Here, maintainers must scavenge every hydraulic valve and cable from rusted airframes that have sat in the sun for decades, just to keep the E-3 mission capable. Furthermore, the TF-33 engine is a notorious oil-thirsty beast. Oil leaks are a chronic ailment, forcing ground crews to climb onto the wings and manually top off dozens of gallons of lubricant after every long sortie. The most surprising feature of the E-3 isn't found in its microchips, but in its flight control system. In an era where every fighter maneuvers via fly-by-wire, the E-3 is still stuck with a 1950s design, a system of steel cables linked directly to the aerodynamic control surfaces. It sounds like an archaic patchwork, but this legacy of the past provides a life-or-death perk: near total immunity to electromagnetic pulses, EMP. If a high-altitude nuclear blast fries every modern computer network, these lifeless physical cables are the only things that won't be disabled. A pilot can still use pure muscle to pull the boosted flight controls and steer this flying fortress through the kill zone. Yet, to keep this airborne command post operational for 12 straight hours, the E-3 must perform a high-stakes aerial circus, mid-air refueling. Wrestling a 162-ton cable-controlled machine into close proximity behind a KC-135 tanker is an absolute physical gauntlet. Flying in formation at nearly 500 miles per hour, the air churned up by the E-3's radar dish creates a bow wave. a massive wall of compressed air shoved forward. This pressure hits the tanker's tail, pitching it upward while forcing the E-3's nose down. The E-3 pilot must strain every muscle, gripping the controls to force the machine through violent turbulence, holding it steady just inches from the steel refueling boom. A sudden gust, or a deviation of a few inches, could send the boom through the windshield or tear off the radar dome, ending both aircraft. The heart of this machine isn't found in its engines, but in the rotating rotodome perched on its back, the AN/APY-1/2 radar system. Physically, this disc is nearly 6 feet thick and weighs 3,200 pounds. Look closely, and you'll notice it isn't parallel to the fuselage. It is designed with a precise 6-degree nose-down tilt. The reasoning is pure engineering genius. In cruise flight, the E-3 must maintain a slight nose-up pitch to generate lift. The downward tilt of the disc perfectly compensates for this angle, ensuring the radar face remains absolutely parallel to the horizon for an optimal sweep of the battle space. In combat mode, a heavy-duty hydraulic drive spins this massive steel assembly at exactly 6 RPM, meaning every 10 seconds, the radar beam completes a full 360-degree scan around the aircraft. Even when not on mission, the disc must continue to idle at 0.25 RPM. At an altitude of 30,000 feet, external temperatures plummet to -60 degrees Fahrenheit. If the rotodome stayed static, the lubricants in its massive bearing system would freeze solid, leading to a catastrophic mechanical failure. To solve the puzzle of transmitting high-voltage power and data from a spinning disc to a static airframe without twisting cables, engineers utilize advanced rotary joint technology. Inside the dome, Klystron tubes generate S-band microwaves with a peak power output of 1 megawatt, enough energy to power an entire neighborhood. This electromagnetic radiation is so intense that the radar is strictly forbidden from transmitting below 10,000 feet to avoid cooking civilian electronics or biological tissue on the ground. Furthermore, because the disc rotates 360 degrees, the high-power beam constantly sweeps across the aircraft's own tail. To prevent these microwaves from frying the HF/VHF radio antennas on the vertical stabilizer, the system employs a feature called sector blanking. The computer automatically kills the radar transmission for a few milliseconds at the exact moment the beam points at the tail, re-engaging instantly once it is passed. Using Pulse-Doppler technology to achieve look-down capability, the E-3 calculates frequency shifts to filter moving objects out of the static ground clutter. From 30,000 feet, the Sentry can see through a volume of space with a radius of over 250 miles, catching enemy fighters lurking in deep valleys, or even tracking warships on the ocean surface. Beyond its eyes, the E-3 possesses lethal ears, known as the Electronic Support Measures (ESM) system, housed in the prominent cheek fairings on the nose. ESM doesn't transmit, it listens in silence. If an enemy fighter so much as flicks on its radar for a millisecond, the ESM measures the wavelength and identifies the specific weapon system. Because one-way radio waves always travel further than a radar pulse that must bounce back, the ESM can hear the enemy from extreme distances long before the E-3's main radar disc even spots them. However, all the advanced wavebands in the world are useless without a brain to process them. The rear deck of the E-3 is a miniaturized command center for nearly 30 mission specialists. But if you imagine this is like business class, you are mistaken. The interior, often called the tube, is a punishing environment, devoid of natural sunlight and saturated with the deafening roar of server cooling systems. To keep tons of sensitive electronics from melting down, the air conditioning must blast bone-chilling air continuously. The crew is often forced to wear winter flight jackets while flying over a scorching desert. The claustrophobia inside the tube is compounded by a chemical threat. To cool the energy-hungry megawatt radar, the E-3 uses a network of pipes pumping a highly toxic fluorocarbon coolant called Coolanol. Throughout its operational history, if a pipe cracks due to metal fatigue and Coolanol mists into the pressurized cabin, the entire crew faces neurotoxic poisoning unless they immediately grab the emergency oxygen systems stowed beneath their seats. During intelligence briefings before maritime sorties, the crew must don bright orange anti-exposure suits, jokingly called poopy suits by pilots. If the E-3 is downed or suffers an emergency over Arctic waters, this 162-ton machine has no ejection seats. The crew must manually bail out into the sea. This sealed rubber armor doesn't just hold in body heat to prevent hypothermia. It is the only beacon of hope for rescue teams searching the bleak monotony of ice and heavy waves. Rising above this atmospheric pressure, the crew wields absolute power through the Link 16 data network. Without needing to shout over vulnerable radio channels, the E-3 transmits frequency-hopping digital data directly to the cockpit displays of F-15s or F-35s flying hundreds of miles away. The E-3 acts as the spotter, allowing friendly fighters to keep their radars off for stealth, receiving coordinates to execute a silent kill. This is the art of the invisible assassin. The dominance of the AWACS system was written in blood during Operation Desert Storm in 1991. Facing Iraq's dense Qari air defense network and thousands of fighters, E-3 squadrons established an invisible eagle wall across the Middle Eastern skies. Operating 24/7, the E-3 controlled and coordinated over 120,000 coalition sorties. In a congested battle space with thousands of aircraft roaring through the skies daily, they established an unprecedented record. Not a single mid-air collision occurred under their watch. More impressively, out of the 41 Iraqi aircraft downed in air-to-air combat, 38 were neutralized specifically through long-range vectoring by the E-3 AWACS. Iraqi pilots had barely retracted their landing gear before being picked up by the E-3's radar, often being shredded by American missiles before they even realized they were being hunted. This leads us to the most critical question. How does a bulky machine with no armor, no guns, and no speed survive if targeted by the enemy? The survival of the AWACS depends entirely on the sanctuary doctrine. The E-3 typically orbits hundreds of miles behind the front lines, encased in a protective layer of heavy Vanguard fighters assigned specifically to combat air patrol. However, rival powers have developed ways to shatter this shield, using ultra-long-range air-to-air missiles like the R-37M or the PL-21 AWACS killers, specifically designed to decapitate the enemy's command and control. A common misconception is that the E-3 can simply engage its electronic jammers to blind an incoming threat, but this is often a lethal trap. Modern anti-AWACS missiles are equipped with a home-on-jam mode, or HOJ. This means that if the E-3 broadcasts a high-powered jamming signal, the missile simply shuts down its own internal radar seeker and homes in directly on the E-3's own interference like a moth to a flame. In this high-stakes game, jamming can sometimes be an act of accidental suicide. If the alarm warns that a radiation-seeking missile is closing in at Mach 5, what does the E-3 do? First, it deploys chaff and flares to spoof the seeker. Second, and most critically, it executes the blinking and diving tactic combined with MCON. The E-3 will instantly kill its massive radar feed and all radio transmissions to sever the missile's guidance source. Simultaneously, the pilots will execute a high-G maneuver, forcing the massive airframe into an emergency descent toward the sea surface. The physics behind this dive are ruthless. A hypersonic missile launched from 186 miles away does not have a motor that burns all the way to the target. It travels primarily on residual kinetic energy in its terminal phase. By diving into the thick, dense air at low altitudes, the E-3 forces the missile to fight against massive atmospheric drag. The interceptor rapidly bleeds kinetic energy, its speed drops catastrophically, and it eventually tumbles into the ocean before ever reaching the E-3. For an AWACS, running away is a highly refined art of survival. The U.S. military is now counting down the days until the E-3 officially retires, handing the throne to its successor, the Boeing E-7 Wedgetail. This transition is a quantum leap from the mechanical age to the digital era. The E-3's rotating disk has revealed a fatal vulnerability: its refresh rate. Because the disk takes a full 10 seconds to complete a 360-degree rotation, the computer only updates a target's position once every 10 seconds. For a stealth fighter traveling at Mach 1.5, it can cover over 3 miles during that 10-second blind window. The track on the screen becomes fragmented, making a missile lock-on nearly impossible. The E-7 discards the heavy mechanical rotodome for a fixed MESA active electronically scanned array, or AESA, radar, shaped like a shark fin on its back. The E-7 doesn't need to spin. It uses thousands of independent transmit-receive modules to steer electromagnetic beams at the speed of light. Instead of waiting 10 seconds, the E-7 can stare at a specific sector where a stealth threat might be lurking, updating the target's position hundreds of times per second. It is lighter, thousands of times faster, cheaper to maintain, and sensitive enough to peel back the layers of next-generation stealth. In reality, this historic handover is creating a strategic headache for the U.S., known as the capability gap. The Pentagon officially divested 13 E-3 Sentries in 2023 to consolidate funds. However, the first E-7 wedge-tail prototype isn't scheduled for delivery until 2027. During this high-risk window, the remaining 18 aging E-3s must shoulder the entire global early warning network. They will have to wring out every last drop of lubricant, facing mission-capable rates that have plummeted below 45%, just to keep those mechanical radar disks spinning until their successor truly takes flight. After nearly half a century of guarding the skies, the E-3 Sentry has more than fulfilled its role as a pioneer. Its story is an epic of mechanics, radar waves, and the iron discipline of its crews. But as we look toward the horizon, we are standing at a strategic crossroads. On one side is the E-3 Sentry, with its rugged mechanical cables that never fear an EMP. On the other is the E-7 Wedgetail, with absolute digital supremacy, but a new vulnerability to the risks of cyber warfare. From your tactical perspective, in a total war scenario, will the resilience of old-school mechanics or the sophistication of the microchip hold the ultimate advantage for survival? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you respect the silent crews who wear winter jackets in bone-chilling server rooms to keep our skies safe, don't forget to like and subscribe to join us as we continue to dissect the machines that change the world. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.